Welcome to Storm Tracker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
Well, what a run by the Carolina Hurricanes as they head into the Olympic break. The Canes have gone 12-1-3 over the last 16 games with points in 11 straight and are finding ways to win every night. Goaltending has been stellar, the power play has been exceptionally good, and as a result, the Canes find themselves in a great spot entering the break. First in the Metro and third overall in the NHL. Interestingly enough, despite these results, the Canes haven't been playing their best hockey. They have room to improve in terms of getting to their game and by possibly making some key additions before the March 6th trade deadline. How do we see the Canes at the break? What needs to continue? What needs to change? Joining me as always are hockey savants, Erin and Katie. Ladies?
Hi there.
Okay, so a little bit of a break. It's been a hectic season for sure. And I think a lot of us are feeling, hey, a few days off, that's okay. But the Canes have been playing great hockey. And what a way for them to go into the break playing so well. Erin, your thoughts?
It has been a really fun stretch. I think that, like you said in the intro, though, the fun part has been that they've had to find ways to win games. It has not been every night that smooth Canes hockey that we know and love so well, where, they suppress the shots against and get some opportunistic scoring and, and good enough goaltending to get through it. They've had nights when they've had such great goaltending that the goalie actually stole the game, and that's a kind of an unusual territory for the Canes to be on. They've had nights when they just couldn't seem to get anything clicking at 5-on-5, and they won the game from some special teams goals. When's the last time we said that? So it's been an interesting thing because, I think that is having that resilience to find ways to win when maybe everything isn't going according to Rod Brindamore's Bible of hockey and how we do things the right way. That is a leap forward for this team in a lot of ways. And I think it's something that they're definitely going to need when they get into the playoffs. So it's encouraging to see that they don't give up and get down when they're down by a goal or two and the third period is underway. And, we've seen them have some great comeback wins. We've seen them, I think that the scariest times for us lately have been when they've actually come in with the lead, because we are a little bit holding our breath and saying, please don't collapse, because we've seen that a few times too. But overall, it's been entertaining, and we're already missing it, to a certain extent, even though it's good for them to have the break and good for us to have the break. But we miss our Canes, right?
Absolutely.
Well, the Canes, in their last 10, they're 8-0-2, and there's only a few teams that are playing as well right now. Of course, Tampa continues their outstanding play, and they've had a great season. But, there's a kind of unusual suspect with the Columbus Blue Jackets who've been on a tear lately, so they're trying to find their way into the playoffs. The playoff picture is starting to look fairly clear, I think, and certainly by the day it's getting clearer. And, we'll talk a little bit about that as we look at some of these teams on the bubble later. That's going to be a lot of fun. But, when you take a look at the Canes, it's kind of by committee. We're seeing different folks almost every day come through. But what a story for Jordan Staal. Boy, he's been doing things that, well, I keep asking the question, who's in Jordan Staal's body? I mean, who is that? In any case, Katie, what are your thoughts on Jordan?
Well, it definitely seems like he's having a rejuvenated season, on pace for at least a Canes high when it comes to goals as well as other contributions. Yeah. And he's doing a little bit of everything. I mean, he's on the power play. He's obviously penalty killing. He's doing that heavy lifting 5v5. It's really been great to see all the different ways that he has been contributing and that he has been setting an example as a leader. It has been a little streaky. He had a hot spell back in November or something like that, went cold for a little while, and then he's picked it back up since. So shouldn't be surprised if something like that comes up again. But it's just been great to see how he's been doing. I looked him up on Hockey Viz out of curiosity, and I couldn't believe it because when you scroll to his finishing chart, it's bright red. How in the world is a Canes player finishing that well, especially someone like Jordan Staal with his record? I mean, he's one of the most consistent guys on the team, and usually that consistency is he chips in here and there. But he has been really effective, especially close in on the net, and just really using that big frame of his to his advantage.
Yeah.
And there are so many times in a game where I get frustrated. It's like, okay, yeah, there's Staal. There's those concrete mitts that I like to talk about. He's just kind of generally trying to push the puck in the general direction of the goal. And then the next thing you know, on the very next shift, he's streaking down the side with the puck and putting the best wrister top shelf bar down past the goalie. It's like, how is this possibly the same guy? Yeah. But it is, and he's been doing well, and I know we're all here for it.
Erin, thoughts on Jordan?
Well, absolutely everything that Katie just said, for sure, because it is amazing to watch. I mean, how many times have we said, if you hear that someone's on a breakaway and you look up at TV and it's Jordan Staal, you just go back to washing those dishes or whatever you're doing because you don't expect anything to come of it. And this year he's defying all of those expectations and making things happen so often that you can't afford to miss those moments, which is really cool. I think that we do see that. There's been some research done, and a lot of times when an older player reaches a certain point in his career, he does start to have that little bit of rejuvenated scoring, and it's the patience around the net. And I think that some of the younger guys are going to need to look at that, especially I think of Jackson Blake here, and how frustrated he's been lately. Yeah. Staal isn't taking shots that aren't there, and he's not trying to force plays to happen. And, I know that Rod Brindamore preaches that all the time. You don't want to force the plays and, try to cheat the game and get things going that aren't really there for you. So that's, I think, the lesson here with Jordan Staal is that, at this stage of his game, at this stage of his life, he has that ability to just hang on to the puck a couple seconds longer, be patient with it. Certainly his size helps him do that too. And, that's where I think some of apart from the amazing breakaways, that's where some of these chances in front of the net are coming from. Just that, instead of trying to find Martinook over the side or trying, to get the puck to Ehlers, usually Ehlers is the one getting it to him in the first place, So he has that split second, I can adjust my shooting angle a little bit, I can elevate a little bit more, and he's having the patience to do it and the time to do it. And the results have been all that lovely red finishing, like Katie said.
Well, it's interesting. He just scored his 15th goal. He's on pace for 23. Now, if he continues, we'll see how that goes. This would be his highest total in 14 years. I mean, it's insane, right? So he's only had one other 20-goal year during that period. So he's really kind of turning the clock back for sure. And, you mentioned something I think that's interesting too, Erin. When he's had wingers like Ehlers or Jarvis or, Svechnikov, whatever, who can actually generate some offense. He seems to get more opportunity. And when we saw him earlier in the year when he was so hot, and then, of course, he went cold, as Katie said, I think a lot of that was because, once he got there with, Martinook and Carrier, the offensive situation was different. The opportunities were lower. And it just wasn't quite the same. And, I mean, a guy like Nikolai Ehlers, I mean, he's one of the best setup guys around. So, certainly he's going to find that on, just his regular shifts. But I think he's been doing an outstanding job. And if we talk about the power play next, we have to talk about Jordan in that regard as well, because it almost is kind of a specific timing when he goes on the power play that all of a sudden the Canes power play becomes one of the best in the National Hockey League. I don't think there's any coincidence with that. Of course, he's a big body who can get in and, if he's still on the ice, he's causing and wrecking havoc in front of the goaltender. What are we seeing with the power play, Katie? What are you thinking about the power play these days?
I think they're creating a lot more movement. Having Staal out there has definitely helped, but it's not been quite the magic pill everyone associates with it. I looked up the power play numbers since he joined that unit at the beginning of December, and he has only been on ice for 5 power play goals since then, out of high 20s or 30-ish some goals that have been scored. So the vast majority of the goals on the power play have been without him on the ice. But I think just the fact that when he is out there, they are gaining puck control and they're able to set up in the zone. He often goes for a change in those situations when he has an opportunity to bring out a more skilled guy like Ehlers or Blake onto the ice. And because of that puck, that zone time with the puck, then the unit is able to produce some more chances that way. So, I like the movement that they have. I like the commitment to shooting that they have. It also doesn't hurt that Aho and Svech have kind of got on an overall heater when it comes to scoring. And it seems like even though Jarvis is struggling a little bit 5-on-5 to find his mojo, that's not been a problem on the power play. He has been really clutch with the man advantage recently. So I think there are a lot of different things that work into it. I think they need to keep it up and they need to make it even better, because it wouldn't surprise me if it went cold if they just kind of rested on their laurels, that they need to keep the foot on the gas and not just take it for granted the way that they've been able to produce. They need to be focused on getting even better with what they've been doing.
Well, if you look at some of the stats, I mean, they're pretty interesting. We talked about some of the challenges they were having earlier in the year, and on December 5th, they were sitting 30th in the league at just 13.7%. So we were struggling with that. Their first couple of months were just terrible, as you recall. And we were trying to figure out, boy, if they don't solve this power play, we've got some problems. They've been the best in the league since the 18th of December, so with 30.1%, and they've moved up to 14th overall at 21.6. So, this is something that as we've looked at, the challenges they've faced in playoffs in previous years, of course, special teams has been one of their Achilles heel, in particular, the power play. And if this is for real, and I think there's a lot of things I like on the power play. And one of the biggest things I've been excited about has been Andrei Svechnikov's work on the power play. Boy, the way he's setting folks up is just incredible. Like, he sees the ice so darn well. And boy, that's impressive. But another guy that's been doing it has been Shane Gostisbehere. Erin, what are your thoughts about Ghost?
Well, I think that Ghost is probably at his most valuable on the power play, and that's not taking anything away from him at 5-on-5. It's just because he has been better there as well. But he was a crucial part of the power play's success early on before everything sort of fell apart. And, when we look at where the Canes were, like you said, that 13% or 13, and 30th overall, when they were 30th overall, that was during a stretch of time when so many of the Canes defensemen had been injured that, we had people at the Blue on the power play that don't usually take any power play reps at all. So you can see the value of someone like Shane Gostisbehere, where that is something that he's really good at. And when I noticed, like when Katie was talking about the movement and the positioning, Shane Gostisbehere does not stand still and wait for a puck to come back to him on the point. He's not there just to prevent a breakout, a 2-on, one going shorthanded the other way. He's there to find those shooting lanes and to create them by forcing the penalty killers to move out of position. So I think that it's been really neat to see the level of deception that he puts in there, because he will skate and open up a lane, it looks like, but then it's not really there. So then, instead of taking the shot, he passes it off to someone, very quickly, and then they can, get their opportunity from the side or up near the net front or wherever the puck ends up going. So, but when he does take a shot, he's good about making sure that the goalie is being screened, which is something that I think that they were not very good at early on. They were not getting eyes in front of the goaltender on the power play, and you really have to. So he's just smart. He's a smart player when it comes to knowing when to shoot, when to reset and get that puck going around the diamond shape again and all the rest of it. So, he's just intelligent on the power play, and I think that's been helping them a lot to get that going, because I think his movement helps everyone else to kind of relax and move around more than they were, instead of being so tight in one spot and not wanting to seek those opportunities to get out into a different position.
I think that's true. Boy, the goal that he scored, the tying goal that he scored against Utah, which was set up by Jackson Blake, was just unbelievable. I mean, I just sat there and I was just stupefied. It was incredible. Because again, he had scored a key goal to get the Canes back into the game, and then he turns around and then scores another one right after. So, yeah, he's definitely an offensive machine. And, the key thing with him is, as long as he stays healthy, I think he's definitely on track to have an outstanding season offensively. He's got 38 points in 40 games, I think, now. So he's definitely a guy that, you like him on the power play for sure. Now, if we look at the other special team, that's penalty killing. Probably the team's best penalty killer is somebody we talk about an awful lot, and that's Brandon Bussi. What can you say about Brandon Bussi? He just keeps doing it. He just keeps winning. He now has 23. He's third in the league in wins. And I mean, he's played so many fewer games than the other guys that have won 27. He's got a solid save percentage at .908, but he's also got an outstanding goals against average of 2.16, which is only bettered by Andrei Vasilevsky, who's having an incredible season this year. So, Brandon Bussi, Katie, what are you thinking about Brandon these days?
I mean, he has been everything the Canes have needed in a goalie, and it feels like he's just fallen into our laps. I'm sure that behind the scenes there was a lot of knowledge and planning, and it was no accident that he was claimed as soon as he became available by the team. But it's been even better since he's taken over the starting role. I want to shout out one of our fellow Caniacs on Twitter X, Mark, who constantly posts stats, which is very informative about the Canes' record when they have 3 or more goals scored against them versus 2 or fewer goals scored against them. And their record is almost perfect when they are able to limit other teams to 2 or fewer goals. Right. And Bussi has been a huge part of that. In fact, since the very end of November, 2/3 of his starts, he has only allowed 2, 1, or no goals at all. That is incredible production from him to be. It's not just the majority, 2/3 of his starts. And the rest of the starts where it hasn't been that, it's been 3. There's been very few games, I think only 3 in that time, that he has allowed 4 or more goals. So he is doing really well to keep the Canes in the game, to keep the Canes competitive, and to give them a chance to win. So it has been good. And those stats that already sound so good are even better in that time, because he's gotten the regular play time. He's gotten in rhythm with the team and understands better who these guys are in front of him and how they play the puck. His instincts are great. And he's so aggressive. He's always at the top of his crease. And when there's a chance, he's pushing out towards the chance rather than shrinking back into his net. And it just oozes confidence, because he knows he's got the team in front of him, that if he gives up a rebound and he's out far like that, trying to cut off angles, that those D-men are going to get to the rebound and clear it out. And so the other team is not going to have second and third chances to try to whack the puck into the net. And it's such a good synergy all around with him. And I cannot wait to see how he's able to finish the season, because this is going to give the Canes a phenomenal chance to finally push through in the playoffs if he's able to replicate this production the rest of the way.
Well, of course, he played, he finished this break with a third straight start up against the Rangers, and all he did was shut them out. So he seems to thrive on the workload for sure. And we talked about this a little bit before too, Katie, that, he was rated incredibly highly. And again, when you're not following other teams closely and you're not paying attention, you don't necessarily see this. But I did read a lot of reports on him. I read McKean's and some other folks who basically said this guy he's the real deal and he should be playing in the NHL. So, we were fortunate. And I think Eric Tulsky said recently, he said, man, I should have probably signed him in the offseason. I don't know. I kind of missed that one or something along those lines. Because they clearly knew a lot about him as well. They had followed him closely and they felt he was definitely a player that they wanted to keep an eye on. Interesting, as we've talked about before too, he is in the 98th percentile for high danger save percent at 8.869. So almost 90%. This guy is tough to beat. He just keeps doing it. I guess that's the surprise for a lot of us is that, you figure at some point, okay, the other teams are going to get the book on him, which is what they do. And they'll try to figure out where are the weaknesses and how are they going to beat him. And he just keeps delivering. And my excitement is like yours. I'm kind of thinking, boy, if we go into the playoffs with a red hot Brandon Bussi, that changes all the rules in my view. Great stuff for Brandon and, for all of the folks who are sitting there and going, wow, this is great. Yes. And if you're from another team watching this podcast, watch out when we come to town because the bus man is going to be there. Now, at the same time, I think it's helped with Freddie Andersen. Freddie has been playing better for sure. His last 5 starts since January 8th, he's 2-0-3. So he hasn't lost in regulation. That's kind of good. And, he's allowed 14 goals, but he's definitely making better saves. Erin, what are you seeing with Freddie?
Well, I think that, he's so far this season, he has managed to stay healthy, and that's been very important, because he's not had that good health in a while. And so, just being able to be, a regular part of the rotation and not have to worry that he's not going to be available. So I think that's been a big load off of the Canes' mind, especially given the situation with Pyotr Kochetkov not being available. I also think that, the word I would say describe Freddie as is that he's been solid. He hasn't been exceptional. He hasn't been, stealing games, I don't think. But he also hasn't been putting the Canes in a position where they can't win a game, and he's not giving up a lot of the soft goals that we saw, at various times here and there. So right now, of course, he's going to be backstopping Team Denmark in the Olympics, and we wish him all the best with that. I think that's a good thing for Freddie to be able to do, and I think he's going to come back full of confidence regardless of how things go for Denmark, just being able to have that experience. I do think that if there's one thing that I think that has been unfortunate for him in these last couple of the overtime losses, I think at least one of those, if not two, were shootouts.
Yes.
And that's unfortunate because I think it makes him look weaker than he really is. Shootout losses are not, to me, the same as, losing the game in regulation or in 3-on-3 overtime. That those are goals you're facing every individual scorer one-on-one, and frankly, usually the other team has better scorers in that situation than the Canes do. So that puts Freddie in a little bit of an unfortunate situation. So I do think he's been better than that suggests, and I think that, the Canes are going to be glad to have both of them going into the playoffs.
Well, you mentioned that shootout. He actually made several great saves.
Absolutely.
It went to extra rounds, and he gave the Canes a chance to win. And it was kind of what
definitely did.
He just couldn't pot the goals. I mean, it's, that's a shootout is not the best place for the Canes. And,
No.
In any case, now, Katie, one thing I wanted to ask you was, okay, what do you think happens after the break? Like the rotation, is it going to be, how do you see it going?
I mean, we know that Brind'Amour prefers to ride with one goalie if he can in the playoffs. And so I think that we are going to see an increased workload from Bussi. They already started it before the break because those last 3 games before we went on break, he started in a row, and it's the first time all season that Brind'Amour has given Bussi 3 in a row. Now, there are probably a lot of factors that go into that. The fact that Freddie was going to be playing for Denmark, and so he was going to be getting playing time during the break, just to see, can Bussi handle this workload? I also think he got that third start because, of course, it was in Madison Square Garden, back with his childhood, and getting all of that nostalgia and all of his 40 friends and family that were there to take in the game. And so I'm sure there are a lot of factors in giving him that final third game, but he has shown by performing well in those games that he can handle that workload. And so I would think at the very least, the ratio would be something like a 2-to-1, especially with the condensed schedule and some back-to-backs and such in there. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Rod ramp things up a little bit with Bussi and see whether or not he can handle a little bit more demanding of a workload as things move forward.
Yeah, and they were doing 2-1. Like it seemed like that seemed to be what they were settling into over this last short period of time, as Brandon would play 2 games, Freddie would play 1. And I think that's great too, because for Fred, if he can get back in his game, he's not going to be overtaxed, and he should be fresh going into the playoffs as well. So I think that's a great situation. So goaltending looking good. Actually, it's the best we've had in a long time. We're talking about Brandon Bussi and the incredible season he's having. Boy, it's special for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the D-Corps. Getting it done, of course, the return of Jacob Slavin. Man, that's huge, as we definitely know that. I mean, he's the best defensive defenseman in the game, and he just comes in and everything changes, of course. But there are some warts. Erin, your thoughts?
Well, I think we talked about, what a great player Shane Gostisbehere is and how much he's contributed to the power play. But right now, I think that the pairing of Gostisbehere and Alexander Nikishin has been perhaps not clicking as well as some of the other pairs have done. I think the reason for it is easy enough. You want to be able to shelter Nikishin's minutes a little bit since he's been having to take on such an extra heavy workload and maybe not have that time for some of those development milestones and just kind of got thrown into it. And you want to make sure you don't let bad habits form. And, it's easy for a young player when they're learning to be an NHL regular to get into kind of a survival mode where, everything looks good because they're doing what they need to be doing, but they're not necessarily doing it in a sustainable way. And I know that the team has probably been very focused on that. But along with Ghost, it seems like teams are attacking Ghost defensively, and then Nikishin doesn't have the experience to kind of straighten that out. And then he himself has been confused and out of position on occasion. That may be, communication with the new partner from Nikishin. But I think we've seen some really good stick work from Alexander Nikishin, which is nice to see. I think he's obviously getting the hang of how to do some of that since the Canes do an awful lot of that. But whether that pair will stay together after the break or not, I think that there was a sense going into the break that there were some lines and pairings overall that maybe weren't functioning at the best capacity. Right. But I think that it's unrealistic to expect the team to make sweeping changes when this long break was coming up. So as long as everybody was healthy and the team was winning and the game was going more or less according to plan, I think that everybody was just staying in place. I wouldn't be surprised to see them shake those pairings up a little bit. I'm not entirely sure what they would do, but.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, Rod Brindamore has been very clear. He believes very strongly that Alex is offensively gifted and he's going to be a great defenseman on that side. And of course, he continues to talk about the work that needs to be done to round out his game. Now, he's been doing some good work in terms of closing gaps. He's been trying to hold the blue line better. You see him as the season goes on, you see him start to kind of drink the Kool-Aid of the Canes. And the challenges he has, though, is, he likes to roam too. Quite often we'll find if the puck's heading up to the O-zone, he's right up there with the forwards. He could be in front of them sometimes. And that's something that, and I have to believe he's been given the green light. And I think the challenge is when you've got two offensive-minded guys, obviously Gostisbehere alongside Nikishin, sometimes there's nobody home kind of watching the store. And I think that's a little bit of a concern right now. And they're going to have to figure this one out. I mean, the last 5 games, Alex is -4. You saw him get into some trouble. And in fact, we look at some of those games and his minutes were way down. He was down under 14 minutes on a couple of nights. So they were, they really had cut him back quite a bit. And earlier in the season, he was definitely up around 20 and above that quite easily. So, he's a guy that thrives in workload. You remember he came from the KHL where he played massive minutes. In fact, I remember he played one playoff game. I think he was over 35 minutes. I mean, it's insane, right? So this is a guy that wants to play. And, they're going to bring him along as they need to. And with the defense all in place now, they can take their time. I mean, there's no question he's a talent beyond anything. He's going to be incredible once he gets this all sorted out. And I don't know if they're going to make changes. Katie, your thoughts on the Blue, or any changes you think are going to come, or do you think they'll continue to roll with this group?
It's hard to know. If I had to bet one way or the other, we know that Brind'Amour is a creature of habit, especially when it comes to his defensive pairings. And so once he is able to commit to a particular setup, he tends not to deviate from that back on the blue line. Last year, I don't think the defensive pairings ever changed unless there was an injury. Mm-hmm. But there were so many injuries and so many different things to take into consideration that he was having to play mix and match a ton. And so as long as the top 6 are healthy, I would expect that he sticks with the group that he has, unless it really becomes a problem that he can't avoid. He seems to really like Slavin and Chatfield together as his shutdown pairing. And Miller and Walker seem to be having a really strong chemistry that keeps getting more and more solid the more time they get. And that just means that Ghost and Nikishin are going to have to figure it out and make it work. And I think they will. I think they started at the beginning of the season together initially. And so they'll get there. They'll manage it. But more than anything, I think Rod just wants consistency on the Blue, which makes me think that he'll stick with what he's got.
Yeah, I think the D, for the most part, doing great. And once they sort out those guys, I think we'll be in great shape. And, lots of depth as well. We talked about the good contribution that certainly Yoel Nystrom had done, filling in. And you've got now another player who's really cooking in Chicago, and that's UC Valimaki. He's playing outstanding. So he's playing tremendous. So that's great news with Valimaki now playing very, very well for Chicago. So it gives the Canes lots of depth on the Blue. Now, talking about the forwards, I just wanted to kick it off with Andrei Svechnikov. I mentioned him earlier. I'm all enamored with Andrei these days. Of course, who couldn't be? He's got 9 goals and 5 assists in his last 10 games, and he's magic. It's kind of like last year in the playoffs, right? It was tremendous in the playoffs. And then he kind of started this year, and everything was kind of noisy, and, hey, he wasn't so happy and all this jazz. Who knows? But, boy, he's just making plays like you wouldn't believe. What are you seeing with Andrei Svechnikov, Erin?
Well, I mean, I think that Chip Tracy likes to say that's the magic, and I think that is what we're seeing. We're seeing Svech really, I think, reaching that potential, and people look at him and they say, well, he's been in the league 8 years. He should have been, this is his 8th year. He should have done this before. He should have gotten there before. But they forget just how much of an impact a lot of things have had on the development of someone like Svechnikov. You had, 2 seasons impacted by COVID and shortened by that. He had a torn ACL that he missed a major part of a season for. And then, coming back the year after that, the recovery time takes time. It's not a smooth path for everyone, and there's ups and downs with that. We are seeing him this year healthy, confident, and very happy to be on that first line with Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis. And I think that he needs to stay there no matter what else they need to do for the other lines or what needs to happen for the team. He needs to be a first line power forward. That is what the Canes have needed him to be from day one. And now that he looks like that player, they need to keep him there, and they need to not, move him around just because some other line needs a bigger forward, on the line. So I hope that coming back from the Olympic break, that he just keeps taking another step and that he elevates even more, because I think he still has more that he can do. I think there's a level there that he hasn't even 100% reached yet. So I'm excited by how well he's been doing. And it's not just the points. The points are important right now for the Canes because, they've had some interesting wins lately. But it's all the other things he's doing, making his physical presence felt on the ice, imposing his will on the other players. That's something the Canes desperately need in their forward group, and Andrei Svechnikov is bringing that on a nightly basis.
Well, his numbers right now, he's got 21 goals and 28 assists in 57 games. He's tracking towards his best season in the NHL right now. He's right on track to it. His best year was 21-22. He had 30 goals and 39 assists. So he's on track for a pretty darn good season. And if he continues along, my biggest concern is the break because, he was just flying. And sometimes, you get 3 weeks off, you're on the beach for a week or whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then they come back and they're not quite, they got to start the engine up again. So that's one of my concerns. Now, Erin, while you're at it, the second line, you talk a little bit about what the good work is on the top line, but, what are you thinking about with that second line, though? That's an area that, are they getting it done or not getting it done?
Well, I think that that has been the topic of conversation a lot on social media is, the Canes second line, because as wonderfully as they've been doing overall, we all know this is regular season records and these are regular season points and everything else. And we look at that line and you say, are they really constructed the way they need to be going into, because one of the things about coming back from the break is I think the Canes have 25 games left. We're coming into the hardest part of the season. Yes. So many teams are jockeying for playoff positions. So many teams are on the edge of being in a wild card spot. They're going to elevate, and everyone else has to elevate to match that intensity if they want to stay in the positions they're currently in, as far as the top contending teams. But in the last 11 games, Taylor Hall and Jackson Blake have 2 even strength goals each. Yeah. And Stankoven has 0. He has not had a goal in 11 games. No. Blake has 4 even strength assists over that stretch. He's the best of them with that. Stankoven has 2, and Taylor Hall has just 1. And Logan Stankoven's 2 assists, that's his only 2 points over the last 11 games, they were both scored in the 9-1 blowout win over the Florida Panthers. Right. So that was a game where the entire team was clicking and everybody got a point. Points for you and points for you. Literally pretty much almost, I think every forward did at least, and most of the defense as well. So I'm surprised that the goaltender didn't get a point out of that one. We came close. But yeah, so you look at that and you say, well, they're playing the right way. There's a lot of talk about that. I think Trip Tracy mentioned in the broadcast, well, they're playing the right way. They just need to keep doing what they're doing. The points will come. But I look at that and I say, physically speaking, that line has been overwhelmed at times. Yes. By just looking at by the eye test. And even though they're getting those nice little expected goal numbers, a lot of it, I think Katie knows better than I do, is on low danger chances. So maybe you want to talk about that, Katie.
Yeah, a lot of what they're seeing is unfortunately perimeter, especially because when they do drive to the front of the net, they are making that extra move and therefore losing the puck. And so there's considered a chance there, but since it doesn't actually go on net, there's no real danger to it as far as becoming a goal. And they just seem out of sync. They seem like all of them are individually working really hard and trying to make stuff happen, but they're not cohesive as a unit. And it's creating some problems because their passes are off, or they're not expecting the passes when they do come to them, or they're passing up shooting opportunities. It's just very disjointed, and you just feel like there's got to be some sort of change, that Brendan Moore has to find a solution when it comes to this group to make them more dangerous and to make them a proper complement to Aho's line. Because come playoffs, if Aho's line is the only one that is consistently generating goals and points over the course of the 5v5 play in a game, in a series, then teams are going to be able to key in on them and work really hard to think, hey, if we can shut down this one line, then we take away 85% of their scoring threat and we put ourselves in a good position to win. They need that second line to be able to help carry that production weight and expectation so that the top line doesn't get overwhelmed with the key defensive effort from the other team. And as it stands right now, this line as constructed can't move forward. And honestly, I think if you switch out even just one of the wingers, you're still in a place where it's just not going to work. Something I think important and major has to give. What that is remains to be seen, whether it's in the form of a trade or if it's in the form of doing a bigger lineup mix up, other than, leave the top line alone and then really, really juggle line. I don't know what that solution is, but it's going to need to be significant in order to create a second scoring line that can be a proper complement in the playoffs.
Well, and we all know that come playoff times, the top lines often aren't the key lines. It's your second, third, and fourth lines. In fact, if you look at a lot of these teams, they can roll forward. That's where it gets tough. I mean, you look back at the days of Tampa and Florida and so on, and they had people on the fourth line contributing. So the Canes cannot have a second line that can't get it done. And I think you're onto something, I believe, and certainly a lot of folks in the Caniac world are saying the same thing. They've got to add something to that second line. It's got to be somebody from the outside, and what position that is, we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I think they definitely have to shore it up. And, it actually opens up another discussion, which is that dad's line, right, with the Jordans, Martinook and Staal. Is Nikolai Ehlers the right guy in that line? Erin?
Well, I think that Ehlers is one of the reasons we've seen so much scoring from Jordan Staal. So I think that is something that you have to give him credit for. But there again, he has no goals and 5 assists in his last 9 games. Yeah. So he's not generating a lot in terms of, getting Staal scoring. I mean, that some of Staal's scoring has come on the power play, like you said. So I think that in a lot of ways, it looks like a line that should work, and it did for a little bit there in the beginning. But you really, you have somebody in Nikolai Ehlers who is really a great playmaker.
Yes.
And I don't know that he belongs on what really. I know that Rod Brindamore doesn't number his lines, but the Staal line is a shutdown line primarily. That their primary job is to stifle the other team's top lines. So they're not getting the quality of opportunity all the time that someone like Ehlers would thrive in, So I think that, and, I do know that when he played in Winnipeg, he was often used in a similar role, but that again, that's not why you got him. That's not why you didn't get him to turn around and plug him into the same sort of situation he was in Winnipeg. So I think that he can do more. I think that he can drive more play, but I think that the biggest problem then comes back down to the question of who is centering that second line, because we, as you said, we're going to be talking about that soon. I mean, removing Ehlers right now, putting him back with 2 small young players in Blake and Stankoven is not a good idea. We've already seen what that looks like, and it doesn't work. Putting Ehlers on the top line means you're moving either Svechnikov or Jarvis, and you could make a case that Jarvis does well with the dads and might as well be back there, and let's see how Ehlers does. We'll go back to Svech on his right wing, which I know that Katie loves anyway. But I'm not sure that that's going to be the solution either. So it'll be interesting to see what the Canes decide to do, because long term, I think if you have that line in the playoffs, because again, everything tightens up in the playoffs, you're going to be wasting the scoring talent of a player who really does have that edge on a line that is going to be tasked with shutting down the top lines on other teams. And that's not necessarily going to give you the scoring you need to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you hit it right on the head. I believe that it's great the way the Canes are going. But I think, heading into the playoffs, and we've talked a lot about this, that they just have to shore up a little bit. And I know that, for goodness sakes, Eric Telski's all over the place. And as we move into the rumor mill segment, I thought that, it was kind of fun to see what happened around Artemi Panarin. He ultimately, he wanted to go to Los Angeles. That's fine. But a lot of information came out after the fact. Elliot Friedman and others talking about the fact that, the Canes were really pushing hard They had offered apparently a longer deal than almost anybody, and at a pretty good AAV. So it was a deal that was going to make a lot of sense for Artemi Panarin financially. And, I guess as I watched this, I was kind of a little bit befuddled because he doesn't really fit the Canes style at all. He's an offensive, magician, no question. He's incredibly strong offensively. But when it comes to the rest of his game, he's devoid of that. He just doesn't, it's not there. So I was wondering, how's he going to get along with Rod Brind'Amour? This is going to be interesting. So clearly he probably had that understanding on the front side and said, there's no way I'm going down to play for Rod Brind'Amour. Oh, man, that's too much hard work. And it was interesting because, Sullivan had actually been talking to him about trying to shore up his defensive game a little bit, and that wasn't going over too well. So, he wasn't the right fit. In any case, interesting as we look at the Canes heading into this deadline, I did a little bit of due diligence on a few things, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I know you're aware of this, Erin, that there's a massive cap space. The Canes are going to have something like $40 million in deadline cap space, which is ridiculous. But there is a bit of a problem the Canes have, and that's on the draft coming up this summer. They're really thin. They have a first-round pick. They got it from Dallas, but they're thin in the second and third rounds. And then they go down to later on, they've got some rounds missing as well. So they're not really as strong in the draft as historically they've been. And this is something they really enjoy. So I would not be surprised if something we see in the move side includes draft picks as well. I fully expect they're going to try to shore things up. And it's interesting when you look at some of the draft picks that are available. Chicago's got 2 firsts and 3 seconds. I don't know how we would do a deal with them. The Utah Mammoth have 3 seconds. Vancouver's got 2 firsts and 2 seconds. So, there's draft picks out there. Okay, and where do you send somebody? Who is it? How does it work? And maybe it's someone like Jesperi Kotkaniemi for a draft pick. Who knows? All that kind of stuff could happen. Now, Corey Lavalette did an interesting article in The Athletic recently, and he was saying, okay, all things aside, the Canes need a scoring forward. They've got to add somebody else that can score, and they've got to get someone that can go up on that second line, I presume is what he was saying. So, as we look at this, what are we thinking? What do we think the Canes are going to be contemplating? Obviously, Eric's working the phones hard, as he always is. What's he going to try to pull off? Katie, why don't you kick it off?
Well, I definitely think that second line we were talking about before seems to be kind of the linchpin of the whole deal. I don't know. There have been so many names mentioned and batted around, EP40 and Robert Thomas and Ryan O'Reilly and this guy and that guy and the other guy. And I think eventually Toski will surprise us. I don't think it'll be any of the names that everybody's looking at anyway. But what I do believe is that whatever deal he makes, it will not involve a current roster player. I believe that they learned their lesson from last playoffs and that they will do their best to keep as many of their guys present on the roster so that if and when injuries happen, they have proven NHL experience with the team to back it up. One of the reasons that KK has been valuable this season, with as frustrating as his deployment has been that when injuries have happened, he has been there to step in, and his versatility, his size, being able to play center, figuring out the wing, has made it so that the Canes are still able to roll 4 lines, unlike many other teams that end up rolling 3 lines and an AHL line because they're trying to put on a Band-Aid until their injured guys get back. So if a trade were to happen, depending on how big the piece is, it would involve 1 or 2 prospects, perhaps a pick from next year. Teams often don't mind waiting an additional year to get a pick in return. And so that's how I see it playing out. I don't have a prediction on who the guy would be that they bring in to help shore up that second line, but I do not think that any of our current roster players will be on the way out in said deal.
And are you thinking they're going to be really focusing on center or the wing? What do you feel about that, Katie?
Well, center's always more valuable. Always more valuable. So if they can get somebody that they feel makes sense in the system, makes sense specifically in that role, they don't need somebody to go on the penalty kill. They've got 6 or 8 guys who can do a decent job on the penalty kill. They technically don't even have to have somebody for the power play, although that person perhaps would be of benefit on the second unit so that the first unit doesn't have to spend the majority of the time out there. They just need somebody who can be that experienced presence to anchor the line, needs some size to add a little bit more gravity to the group out there, especially if a Blake or Stankoven or both are the wingers on that line. Just somebody to again, as we talked about before, create that dual scoring threat alongside of Aho's line, so Aho's line doesn't have the absolute biggest target on their back throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, I think you're right on. Erin, what are your thoughts about possible moves and what Erin's got up his sleeve?
Well, I don't know that as much as we would like them to get a really, needle moving center, a really good center. Yeah. There's a lot of competition for those guys. Some of them may not even be moving this year. They may wait till the summer. I mean, I know that everyone talks about Pettersson in Vancouver, and we've gone back and forth. We've been talking about him for a couple of years now, really, when you think about it. The question is, do they need to move him right now if they're tanking anyway? They probably could wait until over the summer, because remember, this is a very weak UFA year. There's not going to be a lot of UFA centers available over the summer that, people are going to be rushing to sign. And yet the need is always there. So it might be in Vancouver's best interest, not that I always expect them to do smart things, but it might be in their best interest to wait until the summer. I'm sorry, it's the truth. But, it might be in their best interest to wait until there's more demand and plenty of time to work with Pettersson on his side of things, because he does have that no move clause. So he's going to have to pick and choose. And if he's going to be relocating his family, he might want to say, no, I don't want to do that in the middle of the season. Let's wait until the summer and do it. So that is one thing that I think could happen, is that some of the guys that we'd really like to see either won't be available or won't be available till summer. But I do think that if they have to go with, let's get a good winger, let's get a good scoring winger and shore up that line, you're looking at a situation, and I was thinking about this the other day, the center depth on the Canes is not what it has been in the past.
Right.
Because if you were to lose to injury for any amount of time, even just a few games, Sebastian Aho or Jordan Staal, you have nobody. You have nobody to take their spots. You have nobody to replace them. So, because you can't see Logan Stankoven taking either of those roles, and your second line center needs to be someone who could theoretically play up the lineup at 1C if needed, or play down the lineup at 3C if needed. And he is not. He is not that player. Maybe someday he'll be that player, but I don't think so, because I think that the one thing he can't do is change his height. We all know that he's 5'8", and that's not going to change. So you don't put a player like that as your shutdown third line center. You don't put a player like that as your top line center. So I feel like the experiment to put him at center has been, an interesting one. We certainly see the benefits that the player brings to the role. He's not a disaster out there. He's held his own in a lot of ways. But that doesn't change the fact that as of right now, he's on pace for 36 points. And that's with great deployment, great minutes, power play time, all the opportunity in the world.
Yes.
That's where he is. I think they have to be looking at that. I think Eric Tulsky has to be looking at that, because no matter how much Brendan Moore may like him in that role, and I know he does, you got to look at how it impacts the rest of the team. So I'd be surprised if they put all their eggs into a winger basket. As much as I would be surprised if they landed a top center, I think that they will get someone, a nice, veteran center to come in who can handle that role for the playoffs and then perhaps beyond. So.
Well, the challenge, and I think you hit it on the head. I mean, we've looked at, Charlie Coyle, who's on Columbus, and they're smoking hot right now. He's not going anywhere. We've looked at Ryan O'Reilly would be a nice add for the playoffs and so on, and he's not going anywhere because Nashville's still in the mix. I mean, this is the problem you've got is that, you really don't have much. Vinny Trocheck would be a nice add, but there's so many teams talking about Vinny these days. You're not going to get him. And as you mentioned, Elias Pettersson, the latest news we heard on that was Nick Kiprios, who's on Sportsnet, basically said, hey, yes, he's still in play and the Canes are talking to him. But you know what? I kind of think you're right on this. I think he could very well slip to the summer. The Canes are going to have their hands full trying to find a centerman. I believe they're going to get a player of some significance, whatever it is. And, one of the guys that's been bandied around a lot lately has been Bobby McMahon with Toronto. Now, this is a guy that he's an older player. He's going to be UFA. He's 29 years old, but he's a big player. He's 6'3", and he's 217. He's a big guy, and he's scoring goals, and he skates like the wind. So he's a guy that I think would fit in on the defensive style the Canes have. He could play with us. And he's on track to score 25 or whatever goals this year. So he's a guy that maybe, and you could get him for a couple of second round picks. That's not a problem or whatever. That's the kind of player we'll probably end up seeing coming to the Canes. And, the other forward, and we've talked a lot about it, we'll probably talk more, is Jordan Kyrou. Kyrou is available, and there's a lot of word out of St. Louis. They would like to move him because they think he needs a fresh start and so on. He's been playing very well lately. In fact, he's got 5 goals and 7 assists in his last 8 games. So he's playing well. He's starting to get his game back in gear. He would be a nice add. And again, you've got to find some help. Now, the funny one about this, Erin, is Eric Engels of Sportsnet was saying, hey, looks like the Habs are going to try to move out Patrick Laine in his big fat contract. And how about the Hurricanes? What are your thoughts on that, Erin?
Well, I think that might be wishful thinking on Eric Engels' part. Frankly, it is a funny thing to contemplate. Certainly he's had a history playing with Sebastian Aho, and that's something that people look at. But the reality is that if Artemi Panarin is what they call a 100-foot player, then Laine is probably about a 70, 75-foot player. He plays well in the offensive zone, but don't expect anything from him anywhere else on the ice. And, he's not been, under Martin St. Louis, he has not been a complete liability, but he's just not good at those other areas, And when he's playing the kind of role he should be playing, nobody cares because he's scoring a lot. But injuries and setbacks with certain areas of his life have made that very difficult for him. And I think that would be the kind of player that, you're not going to pick that player up to be your scoring threat in the playoffs because you're not going to be sure that he's going to make it through more than a couple of games, which is what happened to him in Montreal during the playoffs last year. He did get injured. Granted, they were playing against the Washington Capitals, so that's not a surprise. But I just don't see the Canes putting resources into something like that, as funny as it would be. But
well, I was kind of thinking about saying, here's the deal on this: it's slim and none. This guy is not coming to the Hurricanes. There's no way that they're going to take a player that's going to be 4.5, even if the Habs decide to take 50% of his deal. It's ridiculous. You're not going to spend it on that guy. Okay, now, as we wrap up, I thought we'd talk about the playoffs coming up and just some thoughts on that. We've got a kind of an interesting scenario. We've got some teams kind of on the fringe that usually are painful to the Hurricanes, and I'll say the Washington Capitals and the Florida Panthers. I'll put those guys into that category. As we look at the standings, both of them are on the outside looking in, and the Panthers a little bit worse than the Caps. What are we thinking about some of these bubble teams? Katie, what are your thoughts?
First of all, I think the Panthers are missing. There's just too much of a gap between the second wild card, and not only would they have to close the gap, but they would have to have all the teams ahead of them have worse records in the meantime. So unless there's some sort of miracle that happens, and I know we all think that the Panthers are charmed, and they definitely seem to have a lot of help on their side at times. I don't think they're overcoming this, and in some ways it's to their interest to just go ahead and give into the tank a little bit, because the first rounder that they owe, I think, Chicago for the trade from Seth Jones last year is top 10 protected. So if they're able to fall down enough to where they end up in there, they get to keep their first rounder this year. Yeah. So there are some considerations. I'm sure they probably don't like their chances in the playoffs if Barkov continues to be out and injured. And they've played a lot of hockey. They've made it to the Stanley Cup Finals the past 3 seasons. It's a team that could use a long off season. So I'm not going to worry about the Panthers for now unless something strange happens and they force me to pay attention to them again. As far as the Capitals, maybe, they definitely have plenty of talent, but you can definitely see that they are coming off the PDO bender they were on last season, that they were very much overrated coming into this season. And they would still provide a bit of a hassle in the playoffs as far as especially a first round opponent is concerned. Still not particularly worried. I wasn't worried about them last year. I think the Canes match up in almost every single facet with them again this year to give them a favorable matchup. So I know the Capitals can play a rough and tough game, but I don't see the Canes being in a position where they can't handle that as long as they're at full health. What's I find really exciting that you didn't mention, because they're over in the Atlantic, is kind of a bubble team that is exciting, is that the current playoff brackets, if they were to start now, would have the Canes against the Sabres. And I would love
oh my goodness.
That would be so
that would
much
be wild.
I know that last game was kind of brutal as far as a possession and chances number against the Canes that the Sabres provided. But I think once you get into playoff mode, the Canes would be able to do really well, and it would be a super fun season. So that's kind of what I'm setting my cap for, and what I'm keeping those fingers crossed. I think that would be an absolutely phenomenal first round series, and they'd have to pay attention to the Canes. They couldn't ignore the Canes like they do in the first round most of the time because of the first time back in the playoffs for the Sabres, and they really get a chance to shine and be showcased. So there's my bubble team that I want to kind of see stick around.
Yeah, it's interesting because they've cooled, as you know. They've lost a couple of games now, and boy, the season's long, and they had just such a great run. But now you've got Columbus. Columbus is on fire. They won 9 of their last 10, so they're definitely playing extremely well. And you know what? It's going to be interesting. The other team that I kind of wonder about sometimes is the Islanders. And the Islanders, they've got Sorokin, who, when he's on his game, he's outstanding. They've got some, they've got a lot of players really coming out, like Bo Horvat's had an incredible year this year. And they've got some folks on the blue that are pretty strong as well. Like, again, some veterans that are getting it done. They're another team that I'm sure the Canes can handle them quite nicely, but, they're raising some eyebrows these days. And of course, Tony D'Angelo is involved for them. So I always like to talk about the Islanders because of Tony D. As we wrap up, Erin, any general thoughts as we look forward to the next couple of weeks here and relaxing and maybe watch some of the fine play of the Olympics coming up?
Well, since you mentioned the Olympics play, I would say that my closing remark here is simply that there is a factor, an X factor, that could drastically impact teams' abilities to make the playoffs or their chances of not making the playoffs. And also the trade market is going to be drastically impacted, and that is the likelihood that there will be some injuries at the Olympics. This is a hard-fought tournament, and it's, very close. Games are very close together, lots of stacked rosters going up against it. You have underdog teams where there's only 1 or 2 NHLers, and they want to make their mark, and you know how that can go for teams in the top contention levels. So I think, and then on top of all of that, you have the remarks. I can't remember which, it might have been Elliot Friedman, but that there are players right now who are in the Olympics who may be shut down afterwards, who are, they're playing on the last legs of an injury that they've been struggling through all season. And once these Olympic Games are over, their teams may look at their standings and their chances and say, that's it. Go get the surgery, go get the rehab, go do the thing you need to do that you've been putting off all season. And hopefully that's not going to be Seth Jarvis. We know he's had the ongoing shoulder injury, so we don't want the Canes to be doing that. They're certainly not in the kind of standings position where that would make any sense, but we don't want Jarvis to be, aggravating that either. So I look at all of that and I think we could be talking about a completely different trade deadline if some of these players are out for the season after the Olympics are over. And it's usually, statistically speaking, it's likely that there will be at least one or two. So whether there will be people that, would be part of that conversation or not just depends. So that could also change the picture for the Canes as far as who's available, or the teams that have to panic and backfill a roster spot that they really didn't think they were going to have to fill. So hopefully the Canes won't be in that position. We really don't want to be, but we have 5 players overseas right now waiting to play the Olympic Games. So we're cheering for all of them to stay healthy above everything else.
And do you have a favorite team that you're cheering for in this?
I always root for Team USA. I'm a Patriot, so.
Good for you.
I might like other teams and I might like other players, but in the Olympics, it's always been rooting for Team USA. So. Good
stuff. And of course, Jacob Slavin's there, so that's great too.
Absolutely.
Kate, what are you thinking?
As far as the Olympics, I'm also Team USA, even though they probably have the roster I'm least fond of when it comes to their NHL teams. Yes, they have Slavin and they have Nelson. After that, there's a whole lot of guys on that team that I'm not a fan of when they're playing in the NHL. So, but country over individual hockey players, I guess.
There you go.
After that, I do root for my individual players. So when Finland's playing, I want Aho to be a star and to have as much success as he can possibly get. When Canada's playing, obviously, if Jarvy's in the lineup, I want him to do well, or McKinnon, Makar, and Taves. I want them to shine as well. Our 2 Danes, I'll be rooting for them. I'll be rooting for Natchez with Czechia. I want all of my boys on my teams to have individual personal success regardless of overall outcome.
Yeah, for sure. And Team Canada, it's a lot of fun. So I can definitely enjoy what's going to happen with Team Canada. I'm kind of like you. I like to cheer for all the players that we enjoy on the Canes. Team Canada, of course, one of the things I'll be watching is Macklin Celebrini, who I've really been impressed with this year with San Jose. So he could be alongside Nathan McKinnon. I saw them walking in the other day. You saw them walking into the arena together. So I know they apparently in the off season, those 2 guys, along with Sidney Crosby, put the skates on together and have some fun. So that's quite an impressive trio, that's for sure. Oh my goodness!
Absolutely.
Anyway, most important is going to be great hockey. You've got the best of the best, other than Russia, and I know a lot of folks have talked about possible Team Russia, units, which would have the likes of Svechnikov and Nikishin, for sure. But unfortunately, they're not in the Olympics this year. So, in any case, next week we're going to have some fun. We're going to do a mailbag segment. And so we'll be reaching out to everybody, and I'm sure they'll have questions related to the trade deadline, to the Canes, some of the things we've been talking about, and maybe the Olympics as well. So that'll be a lot of fun. So we'll get the word out to all the folks and let them know that we want their questions, and we'll look forward to putting together the best answers we can as we head into week 2 of this break. So it's a lot of fun. In any case, as always, ladies, it was great to talk hockey and to talk about the Hurricanes and some of the interesting opportunities they have coming forward, and we'll do that real soon, as you know. For those of you who've been listening or watching, thanks for spending time with us. We're delighted you could do that. Of course, if you have comments or questions, please leave those in the comments section. If you like this episode, please press the like button. And if you'd like to be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker, please press the subscribe and the bell buttons, and you'll be made aware just as soon as they're available. As always, thanks so much for spending time with us, and we look forward to getting together with you real soon, right here on Storm Tracker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes. You need Storm Tracker.